Hi, I'm Joey Terrill. I'm a photographer from Los Angeles, do editorial and advertising work. I'm here to talk to you about light. Light is one of the best ways you can differentiate yourself as a photographer. Probably because the reason for it mostly is because technology has leveled the playing field for all of us. You have autofocus, auto exposure, TTL, so many things now has made it technologically easy to be a photographer or call yourself a photographer. So many of us start from the very same place. For me, I feel like the one place that can never be automated and a place you can really separate yourself is with light. It oftentimes is what sets the mood. It's what gives you the shape and the feeling and whatnot in a photograph. It's also, and I realize this, it's also one of those things that photographers tend to be afraid of. They tend to take the strobe, their on-camera strobe, leave it on the top of their camera and never do a whole lot with it. And that's a great starting place, but there's so many things that you can do with light that you're missing an opportunity to separate yourself and really take your photographs to the next level. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about ways to do that are very easy, inexpensive, and see if we can't take you somewhere you haven't been before. So I wanted to talk to you about how to take what probably most of you already own, which is the on-camera flash, and how to best turn it into great light. You can actually take this thing and use it in a number of different ways. The most common way, of course, is to use it with the on-camera or the face of it facing directly toward your subject. It's the most common way to use it. It's the easiest way to use it. I want to talk about this little piece right here, which is for dispersing the light. It won't give you light that's any softer. What it will do is it'll spread the light so you get a more even beam. That's what this is for. If you want a softer light, probably the best way to get it, if you remember our discussion earlier about the size of the source, what you need to do is take this light and somehow make it bigger. The most common way to do that is to use the room that you're in and create a bigger source. So if you take and you start aiming this, say off the ceiling, you've just taken a tiny little source and using hopefully a white ceiling, you have created a source that went from being this big to the size of your ceiling. Now the problem with that is often the light is hitting the ceiling and your subject is going to get some shadows underneath their eyes. The way that you sometimes can combat that is they put this little card in there. And what that does is as the light goes to the ceiling on its way up, a lot of it will hit right here and bounce toward the subject. When that happens, you get a catch light, the sparkle in their eye, but it also fills in the shadows underneath their eye. Now, that's one solution. Another solution is you can rotate the head and you can actually bounce it off of a wall. What that'll do is it'll give you side light, and it tends to have a very, very natural appearance to it. It feels like there's a big window over there and it's just window or light coming in from a window. Since it tends to be a little bit lower and you can adjust the angle, since the light tends to be just a little bit lower, what you end up with is light that you don't necessarily lose the eyes. You keep some light in the eye, but it has this very natural feel to it. If you'd like even more, what you can do is you can take one of these and place it on the front, like so, and then now some of the light from this is going to come out of the front here and fill in underneath the eyes. You can also use something like this way. And when you do that, it's the same principle. Most of the light is going to pass through the top surface, hit the ceiling, spread out, illuminate the whole room, including your subject, but part of it's going to come out this front. And when that happens, you'll fill in underneath the eyes, you'll get a little catch light, and it provides a really nice look. So one of the problems that you run into when you're using bounce flash off the ceiling is oftentimes you look up at the ceiling and it'll be some other color other than white. It's a struggle when that happens, but sometimes you'll look up and the ceiling will be blue or magenta, and you obviously can't bounce off of that because it'll turn all the color in the room the color of the ceiling. The solution to that is you actually take the head and spin it around, and then you use something like this, which is actually a bounce surface. And then you can go ahead and shoot with this bouncing off of that, and it doesn't matter what the color of the ceiling or the wall or anything is. And additionally, you can take it and aim, as long as you're aiming the strobe into it, you can actually place this anywhere you want. So it's a very convenient way to solve a colored room. But again, it's the same principle. You're taking a very tiny light source like this and turning it into a light source of this size. It's very convenient. These fold down very quickly and they open up very quickly. You can carry them in your camera bag, but in the photographer's arsenal, this is a terrific addition to any set of gear that you have, and it turns this into a really good studio quality light. If you'd like something a little more dramatic, a great way to work with speed lights is there's a zoom function on the back. The zoom function essentially, when you're shooting with a lens that's linked to the on-camera strobe, as you zoom the lens, the angle of the speed light actually changes. And what ends up happening is if you're shooting with a wide-angle lens, this adjusts to cover the wide-angle lens. When you're shooting with a telephoto lens or zoom to the telephoto position, the strobe narrows down so it's only covering what it needs for the lens you're using. The advantage to that, it makes the strobe much more efficient. You're not wasting light to the side of what you need. But you can also control that zoom function manually on the back, and what you can do is if you're shooting with a wider lens, you can zoom and tighten up the light. So it's essentially like getting a spotlight. Now, that is a terrific way to add interest to your light, because instead of getting that even, totally flat looking light, you can put the center of interest exactly where you want it on your subject. It's a great way to do it. There are other modifiers you can use. Some of these fold up. This one in particular, it works the same way as the bounce function, but you can shape these any way you want. Again, most of the light is going to go up and hit the ceiling. A lot of it's going to come out of here. If you tilt it forward a little bit, all of it's going to come out of here now. But again, it's the same principle. You've taken what was a very small very small source and made it much bigger using this. You can also take something like this, wrap it around like so, aim it straight ahead, and again, you have a very narrow source now. This is called a snoot, and you've essentially turned your light source into a very narrow beam of light. It's another great way to control your light. And lastly, you can use things like this, which are essentially like a miniature little softbox. You just attach it like so. And essentially, again, you've made it larger, and it's a more flattering light. Great way to go. There's a lot you can do with this. So the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is actually taking the flash off the camera. There are so many reasons to do this. Probably the biggest one is that you don't really have to think about where the light is as you move as a photographer. The biggest struggle that you run into is just making sure that the linkage between the camera and the flash remains together so that you can continue to shoot in TTL. The manufacturers and some other manufacturers have worked out ways to do this. So to put your mind at ease, you can continue to work as though the strobe was still on the top of the camera, but you can remove it and essentially put the light anywhere you want, and then as a photographer, move the camera where you want and the light stays where it is. This is just one example of how you can use it off the camera. All we have is a light stand and a softbox, and in the back, your on-camera strobe mounts in this little shoe, and essentially, when you fire the camera, this goes off. Now, the beauty of this, like I say, is that once you put the light in the position that you want it, say you're making a portrait of someone, you can then move around. You can come in with a wide-angle lens, you can back up and go to a tighter telephoto, but no matter what you do, the light stays the same. Whereas when it's on the top of the camera, every time you move, the light moves with you, and therefore the light is going to change in terms of quality and everything else. So I really like this because once you get it off the camera, you can essentially put it where you want it, forget it and just go to town and think about getting that performance out of your subject, getting the expression that you want, and it's a real easy thing. Like I say, you can put it like anything else, like the reflectors and whatnot. You can carry it in a camera bag. These things, what's amazing about them is they fold down so small. I mean, it ends up in a little case like this. They're not terribly expensive, but it really will take your photography to the next level. Okay, I wanted to wrap it up with ways you can use light in sports photography. There are so many ways to use light, and I really want to make the point that it's a great way to differentiate yourself from other photographers that might be standing with you on the sidelines. Probably the most common and easy way to use light to differentiate yourself is, say you're out at something like a track meet. Perfect example. You're out, it's noon. You got that noonday sun and you've got those deep shadows underneath the eyes. A great thing to do is just add a little fill flash in there. These cameras today are great using the TTL. Set the strobe up in such a way that you're just putting, the way I like to describe it is you're just putting a kiss of light on the subject. You don't want to make it look as though the strobe is doing all the lighting. It's just enough so that you're trying to really overcome that ugly noon look and just put a little kiss of light. Now, if you want to go and go into the fun realm rather than just trying to make up for ugly light at noon, a great thing to do is start playing around with shutter speeds, rear curtain sync, so that you get a little movement in your subject, a little strobe, and a little bit of ambient light. And what ends up happening is you start to see just a little what we call ghost, that as say it's again at a track meet, let's say there's a runner running, you'll just see a little extra movement. And the great thing about that is that's what sports is all about, is it's not standing, or they call it Sports Illustrated, not standing around Illustrated. People actually move. And so what you want to do is with your light, in any way that you can, bring out the color, but you also want to bring out the movement. And so think about ways that you can use your strobe. Like I say, play with the settings, rear curtain sync, just a little bit of fill flash, mixing the two together. And I think you'll notice that if you start doing that, you'll separate yourself from other photographers standing there with you on the sidelines. Thanks.